Our time is up. If you can make it back in and take your seats. I'll tell you what, the Civil Rights Institute and FBI really know how to pack a program. The knowledge has been so powerful today. And I can promise you it's only going to get better. They're giving them a television wrap outside, really. Paul Damon is doing this. And here they come. We'll give you guys just a couple more minutes to come in. I'll let these last few take their seats, and then I will introduce our next presenter. So presenting next on trafficking, we've talked human trafficking, we've talked sex trafficking, which is also human trafficking, and labor trafficking. Chris Lim, is a University of Alabama professor. The university brought him in to lead their new efforts to create a statewide human trafficking protocol for law enforcement, social service, and other service providers here in Alabama. Prior to coming here, he served 14 years in law enforcement for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. He worked in the nonprofit organization Saving Innocence. That's in LA. They worked with minors who were victims of sex trafficking. So to get a little more knowledge, if you guys are ready, I'm going to bring Chris Lim up right now to tell us about what he's doing these days. Chris?
Great. Thank you for that kind introduction. I know we've been through 2 days now of a lot of information, and it's been heavy. And we're really getting to the point where I'm excited for, because we're going to be talking about solutions and what can be done about this. And so it's exciting to be here, and it's a good time to be talking with you all. And I do appreciate the introduction. It's much better than heard about the visiting preacher that was introduced as the person that we know is supposed to be here today because the person that we wanted could not make it. So, introductions are a lot like eulogies. You know, people are saying nice things about you that you wish you could live up to. And today, I think as we move into the time of the discussion groups and the panel groups, we each have an opportunity to really write the script of what we want our eulogies to say about us. Yesterday and today, we've taken time to honor the evil and horrific events of 55 years ago that just happened across the street behind me, in front of you. And we did that by really looking at the evil and horrific things that are currently happening in our state and in the city and in our world. The tagline, I think, is great. Tomorrow's freedom is dependent on today's fight. So today we've learned about both sex and labor trafficking. We heard what really the powerful, heartbreaking, and really hopeful account from Tina. Our hearts and minds have been stirred to solutions. And there is an answer. We can eliminate human trafficking in our state. The exciting thing is, and I think we're going to see later, is that there are already efforts underway. and very effective efforts. Now, I'm blessed to understand this from a few perspectives, as was mentioned. I had the opportunity to work in law enforcement, so I understand the concerns of law enforcement. I've had the opportunity to work with nonprofit organizations, those NGOs that provide direct services to victims of human trafficking, both domestically and internationally. So I understand the struggles of a nonprofit. And I've had the opportunity to work with victims and with those nonprofits and become friends with some of them. I've had the unique opportunity to work in an undercover capacity in the brothels and massage parlors of the Philippines and Cambodia, to work with victims of police violence in Africa, and in the Middle East with domestic servitude and victims working in sweatshops. And so I'm honored to be able to see this from a kind of a strange perspective that is able to see it from the work of and the view of people that are involved in this in several different levels. And this is what I know about Alabama. Alabama is a microcosm of human trafficking around the world. Just about every form of human trafficking that exists in the world today exists right here in our state. So the School of Social Work, actually at the University of Alabama, was awarded a grant from the Department of Justice to create a statewide human trafficking protocol. We titled it Beams. Not after Lieutenant Beams, although he's worthy of that. But as you can see, they're bringing the exploitation of Alabama's minors to an end, or to a stop. And from my desk at the university, I can look out the window and see this. This is the Malone Hood Clock Tower that stands outside of the Foster Auditorium. And on June 11th, 1963, just 3 months before the bombing across the street that took the lives of those 4 precious little girls, the Democratic segregationist Governor George Wallace stood in the doorway of the auditorium, blocking the entrance to prevent the enrollment of 2 black students, Vivian Malone and James Hood. Well, as we know, he didn't end up winning that fight. They won that fight, and Malone ended up graduating from UA in 1965 with a degree in personal management. Hood withdrew a few months later, but was actually able to return and earned a doctorate in 1997. Interestingly enough, just in the break, I was able to talk with the young lady in the audience here whose mother graduated with a master's degree from UA in 1968, I think it was. So I'm honored to sit at my desk there and really sit in the shadow of history. And sometimes those dark and heavy shadows can give way to light and refreshing shadows. And this weekend and today is one of those times on this sacred ground. Civil rights, there's a document that acknowledges all of our human rights, and it reads in part, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." And I was thinking about that as I was thinking about how it applies to victims of human trafficking. And so let's first break that down to understand this. So we hold these truths. They're not opinions, they're not beliefs, they're not even values, but they're truths to be self-evident. They don't need proof, they don't need argument, they don't need debate. They're clearly obvious. Well, what are the truths that are self-evident? That all men, rightly understood, obviously this is gender and color neutral, inclusive phrase. All men includes men and women, children, black, white, brown, yellow, are created equal. Each one of us possesses intrinsically the same worth and value and dignity and rights. That we are endowed by our Creator. The source and worth of our rights are from God. They're not from a politician or a preacher, not from government or society, not from a court or consensus. They're from our Creator. Certain unalienable rights, because our value and rights are given by God, they cannot be removed, reduced, or ruled against by any man. No court, no human, no person, no politician, no government. What God has given us, no man can remove. And that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So this battle against trafficking is sacred ground, not because of any importance that we put on it, but because each human being has value and dignity and rights that are given to them by their Creator. And so it's inspiring, I think, that we are really standing in the shadow of the 16th Street Baptist Street Church 55 years later. And we see the community and law enforcement, both federal and local, and faith coming together to put an end to human trafficking. Now, it's not always been this way, right? There was a time not too long ago that our government did not protect these rights for all men. And there was a time not too long ago that our community didn't see the value and dignity of all men. As a community, we're not unfamiliar with such battles. 60 years ago, Alabama was the birthplace of civil rights. And as the seed sown by the sacrifices of many men and women have bared much fruit, somehow many in our state, in our nation, are now living under the burdens of injustice again. The injustice of human trafficking. And their injustice experience is not that of 1960, but of 1860. They are facing death daily, as we have heard in these stories and examples, living in captivity, forced to work for the benefit of their owner, stripped of their dignity, experiencing violence and rape, beaten, starved, sold, and resold. They're alienated from those unalienable rights. So, ladies and gentlemen, sadly, this is not hyperbole. The horrifying truth is that there are thousands of souls right now living in these conditions right here in Alabama, right now as we speak. Truthfully, the numbers are hard to come up with. And I've heard several speakers today, talk about how they don't even want to give numbers. With a little bit of fear and concern, I'm going to give some numbers because we did a little bit of homework. And so why are these numbers difficult to come up with, though? It's because it's a crime that's underreported. It's because traffickers sometimes are not convicted under human trafficking laws. It's because that victims don't see themselves as victims. It's because that we don't have the ability to coordinate and communicate data across agencies to understand what the prevalence and scope is. It's these reasons and many more. But we've tried to come up with what we think is a responsible estimate in terms of prevalence and scope here in Alabama based on our initial research. We've looked at data from Polaris. Many of you know that they operate the National Human Trafficking Hotline. We've looked at data from Thorn, who aggregates information and data for law enforcement about victims and traffickers. We've looked at the Guardian Group, who looks at ads online. We've conducted 20 focus groups throughout the entire state, north to south, east to west, all over, everywhere in between, talking to 114 frontline professionals who deal with victims of human trafficking. You know, as you know, we heard some of this already. Traffickers, one of the things that they use is ads online, right? They will, they'll post somebody up for sale online to waiting predators, and they do this through various platforms. Last year, the state of Alabama, there were 641,000 such ads. That's a massive number. It's hard to wrap your mind around. And when I saw that, I was thinking, okay, but how many victims does that 641,000 actually represent, right? So I'm going to be honest with you here. We took a shot at it. So this isn't necessarily scientific, but we calculated out that not all of those 641,000 are actually victims of human trafficking, and that traffickers will post their victims in various platforms and numerous times for one person. And various things like that. And so we estimated that on any given month, that 641,000 may represent up to about 5,008 victims of sex trafficking that are trafficked in and through our state on any given month. We conducted those 20 focus groups throughout the state, where we talked to 114 participants from law enforcement and DHR and the churches and other nonprofits. These are frontline people that are working with and engaging with the victims of human trafficking. They estimated that last year they recovered or helped about 617 people. So if you average that out on a month, that's 51 a month. There we go, 51 a month. So far our research tells us two things. One is that we have thousands of victims in this state, and two, that we're only reaching really less than 1% of those victims. You see, those ads that we're talking about, those 641, they only represent victims of sex trafficking. People are trafficked in many different ways. We've got domestic violence, domestic servitude, agricultural, working in the fields, restaurants, nail salons, organized begging, massage parlors, familial trafficking. We tend to focus on sex trafficking, but there are people being trafficked in all of those various ways throughout our state. So the actual number of total potential victims of human trafficking in our state in any given month is likely higher than the 5,000. How is this possible? How is it that 160 years after slavery was outlawed in this country, that slavery still exists? It's not because the laws allow it, because they do not. And it's not because law enforcement is complicit, because they are not. And it's not because the society approves it, because it does not. Despite the progress made, slavery has resurged. We call it modern day slavery. And I like how Tina said there's nothing modern about it, right? It's different. It's not different in nature, it's just different in time. It's happening now, and many of the tactics are the same as she explained to us and described to us. This modern day slavery knows no color, has no boundaries, has no borders. I guess we could take some solace in the fact that we know what this evil of slavery looks like. We've seen it before. We've thoroughly investigated it, have historically examined it. We have created laws and developed the tools to eradicate it. The abolitionists of 2 centuries have laid the path for the abolitionists of today. And the civil rights activists of 2 generations ago have laid the foundations upon which we stand today. Vivian Malone and James Hood, they actually weren't the first black students to enroll at the University of Alabama. In fact, 7 years earlier, in 1956, Atheline Lucy, she was accepted into the university. She attended for 3 days. And on that 3rd day, the mobs and the threats of violence and all of that got so bad that she was fearing for her life. The school said, we cannot protect her. Now, we've come a long way and we've seen many successes. And while there is still much that can be done legislatively, in policy, in changing processes, it's not for lack of laws that we are not protecting the vulnerable among us. And it's not for lack of funding that we're not protecting the vulnerable among us. It's not for the lack of resources that we're not protecting the vulnerable among us. And yet some states, not Alabama, but some states are using the excuse from 1956 that we cannot protect her. What they're really saying is that we will not protect her. They've put higher priorities over protecting the vulnerable among us. But we're not one of those states. We did not say we cannot protect her. No, we're saying that we will protect her. Our laws could be better, but we can work with what we got. And we could have more money, but we'll make do with what we have. And our resources, well, we don't have everything that we'd love to have, but we'll make the most of what we have. No, Alabama has decided to once again lead the charge in this country for the rights of the vulnerable. I'm so excited about this because we've made it a high priority. And with the collaborative efforts to create a uniform statewide human trafficking protocol, we will together eliminate human trafficking from this state. Just like this state led the nation for civil rights 60 years ago, we will lead the nation for the fight for human rights by eliminating human trafficking. Now, what's exciting is that, as I mentioned, there's already a lot of amazing things going on in this state to combat human trafficking, and have been for several years. I got a list here. We have several very engaged human trafficking task forces. Our local law enforcement are working hard in Birmingham and Tuscaloosa and Huntsville, Dothan, Auburn, and other areas around the state. Training is being done by Teresa Collier with Aaliyah, who's sitting here, Carrie Hill with Jefferson County, who's sitting here, Lieutenant Beams are all over on this side. Good job training. Many others. Tremendous collaboration is happening up in Huntsville with the National Children's Advocacy Center. Our federal partners are very proactive and making huge differences. We've passed many very strong anti-trafficking laws. I can go on and sing the praises of the Children's Policy Council, the Well House, Ended Alabama. I can go on and on. There's a lot of really good things going on here in our state. But there's two things that we need to do, two things that are still needed. One is we're not doing a good job communicating with each other and coordinating our efforts. And then the second is we need to do much more training and education throughout all the different professional disciplines and the general public. Many people here today, and as I'm looking out over the audience, everywhere I look, I see people that are part of what I consider our Beams team, the Beams family. We're partnering with the NCAC, Child Trafficking Solutions Project here in Jefferson County, ALEA, the Fusion Center, Assistant Attorney's Office, DHR, Children's Policy Council, Enid, Alabama, all of these and more. Each of us have a unique and essential role to play in this fight. Through partnering with the Beams team, if you will, by focusing on your role to create this synergy, we will together accomplish much more than what any of us alone can. So we're tasked with three things. One is to create a statewide human trafficking protocol. Jefferson County has one, but not every area does. DHR has one, but not every agency does. We really need to, in a collaborative way with all state, local, federal agencies, create a comprehensive statewide human trafficking protocol. So that's one thing. Second is training and education.